Welcome. Today my guest is Egbertem Schram, the CEO of the Culture Factor, our licensed partner for House of Skills. We've been cooperating with you for so many years, more than 15, and we are partners in the area of culture organization, transformation, change measurement, and national culture. The Culture Factor is rooted in the works of renowned professor Gerd Hofstede, and today we'll be talking about subjects of culture, culture change, and culture in business. Egbert, thank you for your time and for talking to us and having you here.
My pleasure to be here.
My first question is, for those who may not know, could you tell us please what the Culture Factor stands for? What is the company, what you do, and how you work in the field of business?
So I think the word culture is a word that a lot of people use, but not a lot of people actually know the depth to which it impacts business. It impacts performance, it impacts motivation. So our mission is to make that impact visible, to make the so-called intangible tangible, the immeasurable measurable. That's why we exist, because we believe that when people have a much better understanding of what culture is and how it impacts them, that they can actually leverage it proactively, lead their culture as opposed to it leading them.
Okay, so could you tell us what culture is?
Yeah.
And how it relates to business and your work?
So if you take culture from two angles, culture in general is about how groups of people behave differently, and we have been raised to behave differently. So you can take it at a national level because people in a particular national culture have been trained in a particular way by their schooling system or by a parenting style in that particular country. That's kind of what sets our deep emotional preferences. That's one angle to culture. What's emotional preference with regards to how we relate to power figures, relate to our community, etc. Then we enter work life, and that's kind of shaping us in a slightly different way again. If you've been trained in HR, you tend to have a different mindset than when you're trained as a technician or as an engineer. Then you enter professional life. The way one company works will be different from the way another company or organization works. So these are different layers of culture that we showcase in terms of where does your coding, your programming, your behavioral impulse come from, and what makes that behavior sustainable. Because we can all work in a different way when we need to, but you will only sustain that, keep that up, if it feels good. So that connection between what we do, how we do it, and how it makes us feel, that's what we visualize.
Okay, could you tell us how the concepts of the Culture Factor is rooted in the works of Professor Gerd Hofstede?
So if you go back to the late 60s, early 70s, Hofstede was at that time working at IBM, the American company, got his hand on a lot of employee satisfaction data. And when he moved into IMD, he had the ability to take that database with him and look at how do different answers of people from different nationalities, same company, different nationalities, cluster. And what he found, and that's the important thing, is he didn't set out to find these things, which in some researches is the goal. You have an idea, you find data to back it up. In Hofstede's approach, he had the data, and it was only when he looked at the data that he realized, hey, different groups of people cluster around similar questions. And that kind of gave birth to national culture, the way we look at it, is how do people cluster around certain ways of work. So that's kind of where it came from. And then later on in the 80s, he looked more specific into organizational ways of working. Initially amongst Danish and Dutch companies, roughly similar national cultures. Later on, we expanded this as an organization, is those emotional clusterings, the preferences, do we see them as well across different companies? And that's when he found, okay, companies have also distinct different cultures. And then we as an organization bring all of this together.
Okay, so there are two models.
Yes.
One for national culture,
Yep.
and the other for organizational culture. And they are different, right?
And they are different. So they are, and this is an important observation because yes, they are different, but they're also connected. And when you, as an organization, know how to therefore use the differences and make them come together, you can do a beautiful thing. Because what you can do is create a way of working that supports your strategy, that's the business end of it, in a sustainable way. Meaning people can keep that way of working up for an indefinite amount of time. And if you compare different nationalities and labor markets, if people work in a certain way, but it doesn't motivate them, either you have underperformance or people will leave, which is also not efficient. So as a company, you want to do both. You want to make sure that people get a sense of purpose out their work. It also supports the strategy, meaning it goes fast, it goes efficient, and it's done in a way that if you go back in 5 years, like in time, or you go forward 5 years in time, people still do the same thing in the way they enjoy it and still supports the strategy. And this is where most organizations struggle. Either people are underperforming or they're leaving, meaning inefficiency and suboptimal performance.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of important words like strategy in business, and I think that everyone who is changing a job feels on his or her own skin what a different culture in a different company is. But why this topic of culture is important from the business point of view and how you can work with it?
So later today I'm going to talk at a conference here in Warsaw, and one of the stats that I'm going to show is only 23% of people are engaged at work. This number hasn't really changed over the last decade or so that I've been following this type of research. Only 23%. That means 77% of people are not engaged at work. That's a huge loss of opportunity, a huge loss of potential extra performance. So that is why it is so important for organizations. Then on top of that, if you look at sick leave figures, burnout figures, they're on the rise. More and more people are bowing out of work life because work just no longer makes any sense. And the unfortunate truth for all of us, especially here in Europe, we need to work longer. But if we're already bowing out now with burnout, etc., demotivation, then what's going to happen in 20, 30, 40 years from now when in Europe that worker to pensioner balance shifts from four to five people paying one pensioner? It's going to be two people. And if one of them falls out for sickness, unmotivation, etc., then the whole system collapses. That's why I would say both at an company level, but also at a societal level, the topic is of so big importance.
How do you work with culture? If I am a CEO or head of HR department in a company, where should I start?
Start with measurement. It's like follow the data. And of course, as an organization, we have particular survey assessments, batteries, to assess these different types of culture. Number one, the rational part, the organizational part. Number two, the emotional part, which is the national cultural drivers. And in especially, I would say, most of Europe, Anglo-Saxon world, you need to do both because so many more people nowadays have been born elsewhere. And that means even if you are, let's say, a Polish company operating in Poland with Polish employees, 15-20% of them, their parents will not have been born in Poland. So they will bring different emotions and preferences to the work floor. You need to take that into account. So start with the measurement, and that's basically the simplest answer.
Okay, and then what? When we measure, what's the next step?
Then the next step is a real strategic reflection on what actually is it that we want, and not only want, but what is it that we can and need inside our market. If you're a training company, you have very different societal restraints on your business than if you would be in manufacturing, or if you're in fast-moving consumer goods, or if you're in pharmaceuticals. Too little time, attention in strategy discussions is spent on, are our people capable of working in a way that executes this strategy fast and efficiently? So first measure, then make that jump to the strategy. What actually is your strategy? Because too few management teams actually have a real understanding What does your strategy mean in day-to-day language? For me as a normal employee, what am I expected to do? How am I expected to do it? Why am I expected to do it? That needs to be really discussed, because if any of these questions can't be answered consistently throughout a management team, how can we expect the workforce to be motivated, remain motivated when they execute their work? So measure, discuss, reflect, make the connection, the gap, and then from there the change starts. But the hard part is not the change. That's the easy part, to be quite honest. The hard part is that tough discussion in the beginning.
So to have common understanding where we are, where we want to go.
Yeah, and why.
And are we able to go there with our strategy, with our culture, and with our people?
And I think on that, on are we able to go there, are we able to go there with our current way of working, our current workforce, or do we need to make changes either to our direction or to the path or to the people?
Okay, so there's a lot of talk about culture in general, business environment, and in change programs. What, from your perspective, what do you observe common blind spots when it comes to change programs, either small or really big, like, I don't know, merger of two companies, or new strategy? Or there are a lot of companies that say we need to be more client-centric. We need to employ automation into our processes. Yeah. So they do a lot of very clear, in general terms, orientated programs of culture change, and they refer to culture. But from your observation, what are the typical mistakes companies and CEOs do when they deal with culture, not at the moment of definition of new strategy, but in the rollout phases?
I would say what they don't do is the cause for the fact that 83% of mergers and acquisitions fail to add value. 70% of change projects fail. And it all starts with the lack of that tough discussion. Why are you buying another company? What does that mean? Not just financially, logistically, systematically, but mentally. What does that mean for people? What does that mean for you as a leader? How do you showcase that new way of working? And in our experience, the reason why a lot of change fails is because leaders themselves are not aware or have not had that discussion in terms of how should I change my behavior to show the way. And if leaders are not having that discussion and are very much aware of their own management bias, because there is a clear management bias, then they will not be able to show the way. They will not be able to lead by example. And in our opinion, grassroots change without leadership change, yeah, it's nice, it gives people a good feeling, but it doesn't make any difference. Because in the end, it all comes back, why would I as a normal employee change my behavior if management still does the same things in the same way? It's like telling kids you need to change. Why? Well, because I tell you. Well, that won't last. That's not sustainable.
Behavior of leaders and attitude and example is one thing. Yeah. But when it comes to a company as a system, how can you work with changing culture of the whole system? Let's say a company is big. It has 5,000 employees in many locations.
It starts by understanding how are the cultures connected throughout these different locations, throughout the hierarchical layers, throughout the functions. Do you have one culture? Most companies do not have one culture. They might have one culture on paper, but in reality, if marketing works in the same way as production, you have a problem because they are fundamentally different functions, so their way of working should differ. So we start with that. Then the next step is, how do leaders in these different locations supposed to act? What are the expectations? If I lead a team in the Nordics, my behavior tends to need to be different, fine-tuned to that region, as opposed to when I would lead a team in Poland. simply because that emotional preference that people have towards power figures, leaders, managers, is shaped differently in these different cultures. So we need to have that understanding and alignment. And then we go one layer deeper. We need to have a systemic approach, and that means what people see, how they experience it in terms of payment, rewards, promotion criteria, how things are ritualized in terms of a particular way of greeting, a particular way of having meetings in a company, needs to be connected to what are those emotional preferences throughout the company. And more often than not, it is the home country from where a company originates, the founding family or owner's background, that has a big impact on what are those emotional drivers. So if I would have a Polish company with Polish owners, Polish management, I will clearly see, in most cases, Polish culture. If I have an American company in Poland, I will still, in most cases, be able to see that American culture in Poland. And in many cases, that might actually be the core of the problem, which is this inability to understand at a management and owner level what drives us and how does that connect to the people that we have hired. Are we synced in line with the emotional preference? And again, it doesn't need to be the same, but it should be in the same direction. So coming back to the change question, if it's a company of 5,000 people, for sure you will be able to identify something like 20, 30, 40 different subgroups, function, location, hierarchy, etc. See what they have in common. If they have something in common, that's great, because that is your communication platform. Build on the similarity. But more often than not, we find they have nothing in common. So before you start communicating any big change, make sure you build similarities. And that you do by looking at how do we do meetings? How do we do greetings? How do we promote people? How do we get people to a leadership level? That would be the answer to that question.
Okay. You mentioned country-specific things. From your perspective, do you see any specific challenges, issues, or basically specifics for companies in our region? I mean, Central Europe, Poland.
I would say there is a big generational gap between the older people, and with that I would say, let's say anybody that has been born before 1980-ish, and people born after. So millennial Gen Z on one end, and then Generation X, as they would call it, and baby boomers after Second World War would be the other category. There are clear differences in terms of how do people relate to hierarchy. Younger generation is definitely not accepting that anymore, the way it was. You see also big movements throughout the Central European and Eastern European countries, whereby cities are becoming more popular places to live. So you're starting to have a split between big city side and urban. You can even see this politically in terms of which parts of the country support what type of parties. And that comes to the work floor. So if you have, let's say, an older, more conservative manager with a young, much more liberal workforce, that's going to clash, because those emotional preferences are so fundamentally different, even within one and the same country. And this is something quite visible throughout the whole region.
I'm reverting to this 5,000 people company. From my experience with clients, sometimes there are situations when a head of division or CEO is faced with a situation that the parent company is introducing new culture, new values. And all of a sudden, the new values are on the wall, in the corridor, in the kitchen, or people get, I have one example that one day employees come to work and they see there is a plate at each desk and there is cookies wrapped in silver with 3 new values, and this was new values introduction.
Yeah.
So still in 2025 we experience from time to time that a culture change is linked to communication strategy of new values, and that's it. What would you advise a person in charge on a local level when such new values, either on the wall in the kitchen or in cookies, wrap up, appear, and people see that's it.
Yeah.
That's the culture change. We have new values. Go on, do your work.
Yeah, and that's what happened. People will simply continue business as usual, meaning nothing will change. It's been a nice internal marketing, a nice internal communication exercise, but
in Poland we usually laugh at it.
Yeah,
when
exactly.
A situation like that.
Yeah, because
appears.
it's okay in 2
but
years.
Imagine I'm a CEO.
Again, yeah?
What should I do in this situation?
So if you are a CEO of a local subsidiary, a country office, it depends on which is the home culture of your headquarters. If it is an American company, then it's this typical American mentality of yours is not to question why, but to do and die. So in that case, American culture is also quite allergic to, or sensitive, I would argue, to compliance reasons. So you can just say, look, in Poland, according to Polish labor laws, we're not allowed to do this unless you want to face legal cases. So use the local system in your advantage to counter a headquarter if you feel that, look, this is just going to be a waste of time and money and energy, and it's creating more sarcasm, more cynicism as opposed to actual engagement. That would be one tip. If it's a Nordic company that comes up with the new values, the Nordics are not very hierarchical and they thrive in consensus. So you can say, look, I would love to support you in the rollout of these new values, but let's discuss how we can localize them in a way that my people will feel it and will live it, which is in both of our interest. So part of the country manager's job would be to understand how to influence, lobby the headquarters. That would be my strong advice in this case. If it comes from a very hierarchical place, let's say it's a Chinese company or an Indian company, then lobby directly with the top of the company. And ideally you already have that personal relationship, because then you can use the power play to outmaneuver any local HR initiative. So a lot of this comes back to office politics and the way a country manager is able to use culture and cultural knowledge to influence their own space of operations.
And that's an advice towards headquarters as a CEO.
Yep.
If you, as a CEO, don't want this process to be laughed at in your company, what should you do? What's your advice towards your area of influence?
So depending again so if we have a Polish company and let's say we have a predominantly young workforce, which tends to be a bit more liberal, my advice is, look, HQ has given us 3 new values. I'm going to give you a week to come up with ideas on how are we going to localize these values locally, and then you step out. Because Polish youth, they're very action-oriented, but they also want clear direction in terms of what is it actually that you're asking me to do. So, okay, I'm giving you a week, look at these 3 values, make them your own.
They come up with ideas and discuss it together, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, not discuss it together as in me as a manager discuss with you as an employee, because there's still the hierarchy in Polish culture, but open it up for the team to discuss amongst themselves in terms of how would you localize this, or come up with 3 ideas, not even how, but come up with 3 ideas on how to localize these values to our team.
How to implement it,
Yes.
On a local level. Okay. I'm always keen on trends, and every year we do a report at House of Skills of trends in employee development area. Looking back and looking at the world right now and all the changes, do you see any changes in ways that companies work with culture, deal with culture, both organizational and international?
I would say they talk more about it, so that's a start. I think a lot of them still really struggle in making the connection to business, because in many cases, many companies don't actually have very proper analytics in place when it comes to mapping employee motivation, employee productivity, employee engagement to particular business strategies, particular promotion criteria. So companies have a lot of data, but very little connectivity between the data points. And I think one of the trends that we very clearly see is that The young workforce has a little bit of this paradox. They want more guidance, not less. Yet they also want to have more freedom within that guidance, that not less. So that puts a lot of stress on managers, which are put oftentimes nowadays into the position of what I would call psychotherapy. You're not just the manager, you're also kind of like a parent figure. And for a lot of Gen X managers, they did not sign up to become somebody else's parent outside of their own kids. Yet they do have a lot of work pressure to get stuff done, so they're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. Mm-hmm. I'm supposed to get my numbers, but I'm also supposed to keep my workforce motivated. I have more and more people that report into me. My scope is increasing. More people that need more mental attention. How do I do this? That's a clear trend for middle management in particular, that they're really stressed and overloaded.
If I am HR manager, head of HR, and I know most of what we discuss, because a lot of HR managers are familiar with culture, and I want to elevate the discussion and bring it to life at my board meeting with my CEO, where should I start?
Start with the financial statement that will make an impact. So there's plenty of evidence that indicates that attrition, so people leaving, costs money. Junior functions, 1 annual salary, middle functions, 2 to 3 annual salaries, and executive level positions, 5 times annual salary. Lost productivity, hiring costs, working costs, onboarding, etc. See how many people have left your company. Just put a number to it. And very quickly you will be shocked, because we're not talking about tens of thousands, we're talking about millions in euros of savings by creating a way of working that will address unnecessary sick leave, unnecessary attrition rates. Because in most companies, management still, understandably to some extent, focuses on the numbers. So as an HR professional, you need to be able to speak numbers, data, and not we have 5% unemployed, like 5% attrition. No, what is the cost of that attrition? So if I have 10 people leaving, mid-level people, and they each earn, let's say, 50,000 euros a year, that's 500,000 times 3. That's 1.5 million euro in costs that could be saved. And that's just 10 people. So if we now have a company with 100 people leaving despite us not wanting them to leave, that's 15 million in costs. That's the language that companies or HR people should speak, not the percentage, oh, we lost 5%. No, what does that mean in financing terms? Not direct costs, but lost opportunity costs.
Okay, and dealing with culture in the right way helps to make those numbers more, well, accurate, yes. I would say. Like there's a link at the end.
Yes.
The way we do things here, how it reflects later on in engagement and attrition and so on.
Yeah, and you can also look into like HR data. Do we see people leaving after 2 years? That's a culture clash. Because 2-3 years is kind of like the cutoff point. Mm-hmm. Anybody can work against their gut for 2 years. Just pay them enough, give them enough status, etc. But if you want to keep people and they leave after 2 years, that means that the gut and the brain are not experiencing the same. And then people leave. So that's a pity. And all of that can be basically measured and connected.
Yeah, I love this metaphor of guts.
Because people will feel it. Like you mentioned earlier, you step inside another organization and something changes in the air. Even within the same company, I step into the R&D unit, something might change when I get to hit the factory floor. That is culture. It's what happens, what's in the air. So we basically capture that.
Okay. Could you tell us a little bit more about the Culture Factor company? So where you operate, in which countries and so on? Where?
So I would say we're a very modern construct as a company. I have a core team that's part of my legal holding, which spans 5 countries. They are all part of the same, call it extended legal entity. And then around that, we have different degrees of franchise or license network, depending on how you would look at it. Altogether, we have local offices or country offices, as we would call it, in, at the moment, 9 countries, and we have franchisees or licensees in roughly 60 countries. 60. So altogether, I think if we count all of the people that are certified practitioners under our brand, because we also white label, under our brand, I think at the moment we might be around 130 people. And then if you take white labeling into account, so people that are certified in our approach, but for example work inside companies, then it would be around 250, 300 people that have been going through our certification courses.
Yeah, and being around the world basically means that we can roll out projects for companies that are in different locations.
It's literally a one-stop shop.
Which we sometimes do, right? That there's a company that is in different countries, including Poland.
Correct.
And then you can do a project that reflects not only local offices, but also differences.
The whole geography. And the benefit is that everybody's gone through the same mental approach. So in that sense, everybody has been coded to look at culture in basically our doctrine, our way of thinking, which gives customers, I would say, the best of all worlds. It's consistency, it's scalability, but importantly also a touch of personality. Because the certified practitioners, they're not employed by me. And I don't want that either, because the fact that people are not employed but are having their own day-to-day work, facilitating different things as well, training in different things, means that they can bring such a wealth of info and insights to customers that it's not just one global consultancy where everybody basically dresses the same, has the same experience. We basically bring that scalability yet diverse perspective to customers.
Okay. Egbert, could you tell us a little bit about yourself at the end? How come you became the CEO of this company?
Sometimes I ask the question to myself. I was actually asked initially, coming from the Netherlands, migrated to Finland to bring a Finnish HR analytics company international. That went quite okay. We ended up working together with the original cultural consultancy that commercialized Hofstede's work. We then bought that company, and at that point I became the CEO. So you could jokingly say that I bought my way into it. Basically asked to start as a CEO to scale the business from what it was at the time, to bring it from a cluster or a hub or a network of, call it friends and acquaintances, to a more professional standard. That's basically what or how I was started, or how I started back in 2012. So it's been a while now. But
okay.
Background is something completely unrelated. I'm a forester by background. But there's a lot of similarity for me, that because forestry in the Netherlands is about stakeholder management. Too many people, too little forest. Everybody needs to find a way to live together, and it's the same in a company. You have owners, you have customers, you have employees, you have management, you have providers, contractors. Everybody wants something.
Limited resources.
And always limited
not
resources.
Enough resources.
Yeah. So for me, it's very easy to explain that red line. It's always been about trying to use data to make different stakeholder perspectives visible, and based on that take better decisions.
Okay, Egbert, thank you so much for talking to us.
You're welcome.
I have once again confirmation that culture is a very strategic topic, not only HR and soft topic, but very much linked to the business strategy, financials and outcomes. Yeah. And I believe we prove it with this conversation. We are proud to be part of the Culture Factor Network and representing you exclusively in Poland and working with organizations across industries. Yep. Just to understand and then transform culture in a more functional way related to business. Thank you so much.
More than welcome.
It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you.